Hello and welcome to MIP TV, and we're bringing you another episode of TA Made Simple. Bob Cook, a TA therapist, he's going to explain has been explaining some of the concepts in transactional analysis, and in the last few episodes we've been investigating and discussing the different schools. We've looked at the classical school, the beginning school as kind of developed by Eric Byrne. We looked at the redecision school, the Gouldings, and now we're moving on to the Cathexis school, or as I like to think about it, TA's dark secret, Bob.
Yeah, it's often labelled that because of the way that the major, form of that school, Jackie Schiff, took some of the principles of the Cathexis school to an extreme, and got some very bad press. Rightly so, by the way. So the Cathexis school is really, I would consider, the third main approach of transaction analysis. So when Eric Byrne died in 1970 of a double heart attack on Carmel Beach, out of that vacuum in the international TA movement came the Gould, what I just said, the redecision school led by the Gouldings, and we've talked about that in an early video.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the country, Jackie Schiff and Mo Schiff created or formed the Cathexis school, sometimes called the Schiffian school. And this was very much about, how can I explain this to you? Dealing with the parent ego state part of the personality, and the idea of desensitizing, replacing, if you like, the internalized parental introjects that we've taken on board.
Yes, when I read up on this, one of the things that really struck me was that with some people, certainly people who are very, very badly damaged by narcissistic parents, part of the difficulties they have is that they're carrying a very toxic parent around with them. And it seems to me that this school tries to replace that toxic parent with a more positive, healthy parent. That's why it's sometimes referred to as the reparenting school. Would that be right?
Or the parenting school, reparenting school. But let you and me take ourselves back to the early 60s in America. And
I'll put my flares on, Bob.
And specifically mental health.
Yes.
So in the how people dealt with severe mental disorders, schizophrenia, acute paranoia, what they did basically was put them in institutes and threw the key away. And so how mental health was dealt with in those days in the United States was very poorly. People didn't have an answer for those, what they call crazy people. They put them into these institutes and didn't know what to do with them, and often gave them electric ECT or just left them to, in inverted commas, rot, really. So Mo Schiff and Jackie Schiff, who were social workers, felt really a real urge to try and look at how to bring transaction analysis principles in the sense of cure at a mental health level, rather than just have these drugs which really didn't do much exceptly but dealt with in a human way. So they turned to TA concepts, and especially some of Eric Byrne's ideas, to find a revolutionary way to deal with the psychological problems of the disturbed people. And their thinking was that the internalized, as you've said, the internalized toxic message of the crazy internalized values were so introjected into the person that they felt crazy. So how about we find some healthy, therapists, if you like, who would, through contractual arrangement, go help the client go through a replacement parenting process, if you like, where they would, by definition, through regression, take on board the new internalized messages and let the other ones go.
Yeah, so I heard you use the word regression. So am I right in thinking there's some form of hypnotherapy involved in this?
You could call it hypnotic induction, but hypnotic induction is relaxation, really.
Okay.
And the more disturbed you are, the more likely you are to regress or go younger very quickly. Through, quite rightly, as you said, relaxation techniques, or some people call hypnotic induction.
Oh.
And as they're relaxed and more relaxed, really, they're more likely to take on the messages of the healthy parenting and let go of the crazy interjection.
So I'm right in thinking that by relaxing the client goes back to maybe a child stage or a child developmental stage.
Yeah.
And at which point the therapist then replaces by their actions and their interventions
Correct.
the toxic parent with the healthy parent.
Yeah, and through permissions and through the, as you said, interventions, developmental transactions to that suitable age.
Yeah.
And really would go back to quite a young age in the process, so that the disturbed person, if you like, is able, through the relaxation and regression, take on board the healthy messages.
So there's echoes of Kohut in this, isn't there? And in the self-psychology movement, this idea that you draw off another to give you a kind of inner stability. Would that be on?
Yeah, that would be right.
Yeah,
that would be right. And of course, so that's the theory. However, I think Jackie Schiff was responsible for taking some of these ideas to an extreme.
Okay.
And she would go, very far back into their developmental history, so they became very young. And some people would say they brainwashed people. There's another way of looking at this. I think it was an attempt, and a real positive attempt, to find effective cure as an alternative to the quite harmful ways that disturbed people were treated in the 60s.
So their intentions were good. It was just that there's an unintended consequence of this. Yeah. There are some reports. I'm sure you've spoken to me about this, of actual clients changing their name to Schiff. Isn't that true? Yeah.
Yeah. And Jackie Schiff wrote a book called All My Children.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. Because they became family members, if you like, and they will change their name to Schiff as they got more healthy. And in the book, she talks about these procedures that I'm talking about in terms of relaxation and regression, and take on internalized messages and having more healthy dialogue, so that you can have more spontaneous processes in the here and now. And she talks about this in terms of creating a family or a unit where people can belong, instead of being left to rot in these mental health places, which was so evident in the 60s, when they didn't know what to do with disturbed people.
I mean, I think the historic context is important, isn't it? Because it's very easy to judge and kind of look at it in the light of today's society, where we know a lot more about mental health. But in those days, the choices were really stark, weren't they? You'd be medicated, you could be electrocuted, or you could be left to rot.
That's right. 70 or 80 years ago, we're talking about, where people just didn't know what to do with people at all of this ilk.
Indeed. So I guess one of the questions that I'm interested in is this school still drawn upon for modern TA therapists? Would they draw from this idea?
Yeah. This is a really interesting question. The answer is no. So you wouldn't find any TA therapists that believed or followed placement reparenting, or any of the methods really the Schiffs talk about. Now, they may draw on some of the theory behind, how you work with passive behaviors, how you work with symbiosis, but no modern day TA therapist would follow these extreme ideas of replacement parenting.
Right. And symbiosis would be what, Bob?
Codependency.
Right.
where two people are acting as one.
Right. So if a client became codependent
Mm.
on the therapist,
Yes, that's right. So
understanding the Cathexis school would be really useful there, wouldn't it?
yeah, some of the theory that is in much. So, for example, there's a really good book written called the Cathexis Reader, which was written in the late 70s, I think, where most of these theories around passive behaviors and how to confront passive behaviors, how to help work with people who are codependent and give their sense of self away to the other person. Some of this theories is very good. I think the problem is when some of the clinical operations became more extreme.
Yes, and one thing we do know is that sometimes people who are very unwell can be very susceptible to influence from anything, any outside source. But imagine, in particular, a therapist.
Yeah, and of course, in transactionality terms, the person moves to child. That's what I said, to hypnotic induction and relaxation. Now, with the Cathexis, on purpose and encouraged, so they will be able to be more susceptible to the parent ego state of the healthy therapist, who, through contract, for many years, they would stay around, so the person could take on the actual new healthy messages of the new Schiffian therapist.
And it's really interesting. I've just been reading Patricia Clarkson, The Therapeutic Relationship again. And one of the stages in that, she discusses the repatriative style of the therapist.
Well, there we are.
So it's, and the same in the humanistic school. Rogers would say the soil of a different kind, by the non-judgmental and nurturing therapist. He didn't say it in so many words, but, you could draw a very strong inference from that.
Yeah, and Eric Byrne talked about Byrnean permissions.
Yeah.
How to give them. It's just that Schiffians went a step further and asked their therapist, for example, to sign up contracts with the clients, the disturbed people, and they had to actually sign contracts that they would go into this healthy parenting procedures, and the real biological parents weren't allowed to see them or come to the community. So they sort of gave away their biological parents in the service of the new therapists who became the new parents.
It sounds like a cult, Bob.
Yeah, in this extreme, that's why at the beginning of this you said the dark side. I think that's the problem. It became known in some circles as a cult, if you like, and the extreme actions in the parenting procedure at a clinical level by the Schiffians, it didn't give a very good service to transactional analysis, I think.
No, or therapy in general, I would imagine.
That's right. And of course, it died its death in the end of the 70s.
Yeah, it's been really interesting hearing about this school of therapy. And I think my big takeaway will be that knowing about it isn't all about not what to do. You can take away that if there is a codependency being generated, that one thing the Cathexis school talks about and reminds us is how to make sure that doesn't happen. Yeah. So it's an object lesson, really, isn't it?
That's right, and also it has a lot of theory about how to work with passive behaviours and how the therapist can work with the codependent persons. Some of the more extreme practices no TA therapist today would advocate.
So on that note, Bob, what are we going to look at in the next edition of TA Made Simple?
A fourth approach, which is much, much nearer to my heart, and that's the integrative approach, which is pioneered by Richard Erskine.
So stay tuned for that, because that's going to be coming up soon. And as always, Bob Cook, thank you very much.